She shamed Black Mom and 3 girls for their old clothes, but their secret billionaire dad owned the whole mall. Welcome back to Beyond Color Stories, my beautiful family. Tell me, where are you listening to me from today? Drop it in the comments below. I love knowing how far our stories travel across the world. Now, before we begin, I want you to do one small thing for me. Hit that subscribe button, tap the bell icon, and stay with me till the very end, because I promise you, this story will touch your heart like never before. So get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let your heart open. Because this isn't just another story, this is an emotional journey that will make you feel every heartbeat, every tear, and every ounce of love. Are you ready? Then let's dive into the story. The mall shimmered beneath the glow of chandeliers, a world built of glass and gold, where every step echoed with the sound of wealth, laughter, and privilege. Yet for Liana, it felt like walking through a mirror that only reflected her pain. She held the tiny hands of her 3 little girls, Amara, Mia, and Nia, her heart tightening each time she saw their small faces light up at displays they could never afford. Their faded dresses clashed against the backdrop of glittering mannequins draped in designer fabrics, their worn shoes clicking softly on marble tiles polished enough to blind. Liana's dark curls were slightly frizzy from the humid air, her face tired but still carrying the quiet beauty of a woman who had endured storms. The air smelled of expensive perfume, the kind she once used to love before life stripped luxuries away and left only responsibilities. Her girls whispered softly, their eyes wide with wonder, innocent to the cruelty that awaited them in this place that worshipped appearance more than kindness. As she passed a jewelry store, a blonde woman in a sleek white blazer and pointed heels stopped in her tracks, her piercing blue eyes raking over Liana from head to toe, as if assessing a stain on her perfection. "Oh my God," the woman muttered, loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear. "Look at that outfit." A few heads turned, amusement sparked in their eyes. The woman's lips curved into a cruel smirk. "Did they open a thrift store in here?" she said mockingly, her manicured fingers brushing her golden hair back. Liana froze. Her heart pounded so hard that her chest ached. She didn't want to cause a scene. She just wanted to find the toy section for her girls and leave. But the laughter around her grew, a poisonous sound that made her daughters shrink behind her legs. "Mommy," whispered Nia, the smallest of the 3, her voice trembling. "Are they laughing at us?" The words shattered Liana's composure. She knelt beside her daughter, smiling weakly, trying to hide her tears. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "They're just talking." But before she could stand again, the blonde's voice cut through the air once more, sharper this time. "You know," she said, tilting her head, "it's honestly irresponsible to bring children here dressed like that. Don't you have any self-respect?" The words stabbed like knives. Liana clenched her fists, feeling every ounce of dignity inside her tremble under the weight of humiliation. She wanted to disappear. The triplets pressed closer, their tiny fingers gripping her skirt as if she were their only shield. The blonde woman took a step closer, her perfume, sweet and expensive, invading the air. "You should be ashamed," she continued, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Poor kids. Imagine growing up watching your mother pretend she belongs here." A ripple of laughter echoed from the small crowd that had gathered. Someone muttered, "Pathetic," and another chuckled. Liana's breath hitched, her throat tightened until it hurt to swallow. The girl's wide eyes darted from face to face, confusion and fear mixing with the beginnings of shame. They didn't understand why the world suddenly seemed so mean. Liana stood up straight, forcing her shaking legs to hold firm. "Let's go, girls," she said gently, her voice trembling but composed. She turned to leave, but the blonde woman wasn't finished. "Oh, running away already," she taunted, her laughter echoing like the chime of cruelty. "That's what poor people always do. Run." She leaned against a pillar, her confidence radiating arrogance. Liana stopped for a brief second, her pride screaming inside her chest. She turned halfway and met the woman's gaze. "You shouldn't judge people by what they wear," she said, her voice calm but trembling under pressure. The blonde laughed again, louder this time, making sure everyone heard. "Please," she said, rolling her eyes, "don't play the moral card. This is a luxury mall, not a charity." Mia, the middle child, suddenly spoke up in her small, brave voice. "Mommy's not poor," she said, glaring at the woman with tears in her eyes. The crowd chuckled again, and the blonde crouched to Mia's level with a fake smile. "Oh, sweetheart," she said mockingly, "then why do your shoes have holes?" The words hit Liana like a slap. She could almost hear her daughter's hearts break. Her jaw clenched as she fought the burning tears. "Come on, girls," she whispered again, but her voice cracked. The scene was painful. People watching, whispering, smirking, feeding off her humiliation like vultures around a wounded bird. A security guard looked on from the distance but did nothing, too intimidated by the blonde woman's air of authority. Liana took a shaky breath, ready to leave for good. But then, from across the polished floor, movement caught her eye. A man seated at a cafe table slowly stood. He had been there the whole time, hidden behind the crowd, observing in silence. His presence was calm, yet there was something commanding about the way he moved. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a sharp black suit, his very stance seemed to demand respect. He placed his coffee cup down gently, his fingers steady as he adjusted his cufflinks. The light from the ceiling caught on the silver band of his luxury watch, gleaming like a secret waiting to be revealed. He didn't speak yet, but his eyes were locked on the blonde woman with a look so cold it made her laughter falter. Liana didn't notice him fully. Her world was still spinning from humiliation, but the crowd did. People began to shift uneasily, their whispers fading as his silent authority took over the room. The blonde woman blinked, her smirk slightly faltering under his gaze. But before anyone could read his intent, he moved closer, slow, deliberate steps echoing on the marble. His eyes flickered briefly to Liana and her daughters, and something softened in his expression, though only for a moment. Then he looked back at the blonde, his jaw tightening. "That's enough," he said, his voice deep, calm, yet so powerful that the words alone silenced the laughter. A few people stepped back. The blonde turned sharply toward him, trying to mask her unease with arrogance. "Excuse me?" she snapped. "Who are you to tell me what to do?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze dropped briefly to his watch, and for a fleeting moment, the engraved word family glinted under the mall lights. The air seemed to still. Something in that single word carried more weight than any threat. The blonde opened her mouth to speak again, but the words caught in her throat as his expression hardened into quiet warning. Liana, unaware of who he was or why he was defending her, stood frozen between fear and disbelief. The girls clung tighter, sensing the change in energy. The crowd, moments ago entertained by cruelty, now waited in tense silence, sensing a shift they couldn't quite name. His hand curled slightly at his side, and the faintest trace of anger flickered across his face. Something about this scene had clearly struck a chord deep within him, something personal. The blonde swallowed hard, suddenly unsure of herself. "I was just—" she began, but his cold voice cut her off. "Humiliating a mother in front of her children?" The tone of his question was sharp enough to slice through her pride. She faltered, her confidence draining as the mall's atmosphere thickened with unease. People began to back away, pretending to shop, pretending they hadn't just witnessed cruelty turn against its owner. Liana stared at him, her lips parting slightly. She didn't know who he was, but there was something unsettlingly familiar about the way he looked at her daughters, like someone who understood pain too well. Her heart raced, not from fear but from confusion. She wanted to thank him, but she couldn't find her voice. The blonde woman, still clinging to her pride, crossed her arms and muttered, "You don't understand. I was just teaching her a lesson." His eyes narrowed dangerously. "You seem to need one yourself." The calm fury in his voice made her step back. Even the security guard, who had been idle moments ago, straightened instantly, recognizing power when he saw it. The blonde hesitated, then scoffed weakly. "You're taking this too seriously." But her voice trembled. The man's jaw flexed once before he looked away from her completely, dismissing her as if she were no longer worth a word. Liana's breath caught as he turned slightly toward her. Their eyes met for the briefest moment, hers wide with shock, his unreadable yet intense. Then, without saying another word, he pulled out his phone and dialed someone, his low voice barely audible. The blonde paled when she overheard the words manager and security review. Her arrogance melted into panic. The energy of the entire mall shifted. Suddenly, she was the one under scrutiny. Liana wanted to ask who he was, why he was helping, but her daughters tugged her hand, their innocent eyes still wet with tears. "Mommy," whispered Amara, "is he angry?" Liana looked at him again, unsure. There was anger in his eyes, yes, but not at her. It was the kind of anger that came from seeing injustice, the kind of fury that hid pain underneath. He ended his call, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and for a heartbeat his gaze softened on the little girls. Then he turned away without a word, walking back to his table as if nothing had happened. The blonde woman stumbled for an excuse, mumbling under her breath, but the silence of those around her made her shame louder than anything she could say. Liana stood frozen in place, torn between gratitude and disbelief, watching the man take his seat again, his back now to her, the engraved word family still glinting from his wrist like a silent promise that this wasn't the end. Liana's daughters turned to look at her, their little voices trembling with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Mommy," whispered Mia. "Who was that man?" Liana didn't answer. She didn't know. But as she took their hands again and led them out of the store, something deep inside her told her that she hadn't seen the last of him. The mall lights flickered briefly as they passed through the glass doors, the sound of their footsteps fading into the cool evening. Behind them, the man watched quietly through the reflection, his expression unreadable, his thumb tracing the word family on his watch as if it meant more than the world itself. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing toward the direction Liana had gone, and whispered under his breath, "It's been too long." The screen fades to black, leaving only the reflection of the engraved watch glimmering in the light. The air inside the Grand Mall felt heavier now, the golden glow of chandeliers dimming beneath the tension that lingered like smoke after a fire. Alex Grant sat back in his chair at the corner cafe, his gaze fixed on the glass doors where Liana had just disappeared with her 3 little girls. The reflection of their small figures still trembled in his coffee cup, each image hauntingly fragile, each echo of their footsteps twisting deeper into his heart. He didn't move for a long moment, only his fingers tightened around the porcelain cup until a faint crack formed near its edge. He had imagined finding her 1,000 different ways over the years, in dreams, in the shadows of cities, in faces that resembled hers. But not like this, not watching her break beneath humiliation in a place that bore his name. The mall was his empire, every tile, every light, every store. Yet in this very kingdom of wealth, the woman he had once sworn to protect had just been crushed under someone else's arrogance. And the sight of her daughters, 3 little girls with his eyes, made the realization even more unbearable. His jaw flexed as he forced himself to breathe, but guilt rose like a storm tide, drowning every ounce of composure he had left. Years had passed since that night, since he last saw Liana's tearful face framed by moonlight, her voice breaking as she whispered goodbye. He had searched the world for her, using his money, his power, his influence. But every lead had gone cold. He had told himself she had moved on, built a new life, maybe found someone better. Yet seeing her now, wearing faded clothes, her hands trembling as she comforted their crying daughters, shattered every lie he had told himself. His daughters. His heart stumbled on the truth he could no longer deny. The curve of their faces, the deep brown of their eyes, even the way they clung to her, he didn't need a DNA test to know. Blood recognized blood, even through distance and time. His breath caught as he realized how long he had been staring, how his emotions were beginning to betray the mask he always wore. His assistant, seated a few tables away, noticed his trembling hand but dared not interrupt. Alex's reputation was that of a man carved from ice, a billionaire who could turn boardrooms into battlefields with a glance. But now, that same man looked like he was seconds away from breaking apart. He wiped his mouth with the edge of his thumb, hiding the faint quiver in his lips. "She's here," he whispered to himself, voice low and disbelieving, "after all these years." He leaned back, his gaze shifting toward the blonde woman, still chatting near the jewelry counter, oblivious to the fury building in the air. Every time she laughed, it grated against his nerves like glass scraping steel. His pulse throbbed behind his temples, and for a moment he thought about what would have happened if he hadn't been there. If Liana had walked into his mall and left, humiliated and broken once again, without him ever realizing. The thought sent a chill down his spine. He couldn't let it happen. Not again. He rose from his chair slowly, each movement deliberate, his 6-foot frame drawing the attention of nearby staff. His black tailored suit caught the soft light, sharp lines cutting through the opulent setting. The watch on his wrist, the one engraved with family, felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of every missed birthday, every sleepless night, every unanswered question. He looked toward the exit where Liana had gone, and then back at the blonde woman, whose careless cruelty had sparked the fire he could no longer contain. "Sir?" His assistant ventured quietly, approaching cautiously. "Should I?" Alex's voice was cold and even, but his eyes were storming. "Call security," he said, sliding his phone from his pocket. "Tell them to seal every exit. No one leaves until I say so." The assistant blinked in alarm, but Alex was already dialing directly, his tone clipped and lethal. "This is Grant," he said. His voice carried the authority that made billionaires listen and cowards kneel. "Lock the entrance. I want full access to security feeds from level 1 to level 4. No one leaves until I deal with this." He hung up before they could respond, his heart hammering not from anger alone, but from the tidal wave of emotion threatening to drown him. The mall's automated announcement chimed a few moments later, a calm female voice saying, "Attention customers, due to a routine security check, please remain inside the premises." "We apologize for the inconvenience," murmurs rippled through the crowd as metal shutters slid quietly over some exits. The blonde woman frowned, checking her phone, unaware that her fate had just shifted. Alex's eyes followed her as she strutted toward a cosmetics display, still talking to a friend, still laughing as if the world revolved around her. That laughter burned into his memory. It was the same sound that had accompanied Liana's humiliation. He began to walk toward her, his footsteps echoing like quiet thunder across the marble. Heads turned. The crowd sensed something, a change in atmosphere. The man who moved with that much purpose wasn't just another rich customer, he was power personified. Even the staff straightened nervously, unsure of what was about to unfold. Liana, meanwhile, had reached the parking lot outside, her hands trembling as she buckled her daughters into their seats. Her heart was still aching from the encounter, though she told herself to stay strong for their sake. But then, from the mall's speakers, she heard the announcement, "No one leaves." Confused, she turned back toward the glass doors. Behind them, people had stopped moving, as if something unseen had frozen the air. She didn't know that the man watching her from inside wasn't a stranger. He was the Storm she once loved and lost. Back inside, Alex stopped near the jewelry counter. The blonde woman turned, startled to see him standing so close. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words died on her tongue when she recognized the face that graced magazine covers, the name that built empires. "Mr. Grant," she stammered, her smile faltering. He looked at her in silence, his gaze sharp enough to slice through her vanity. "You," he said quietly, "find it entertaining to mock people." She blinked rapidly, confusion flickering before panic. I didn't mean—" "You meant everything you said," he cut in, his voice deadly calm. "In my mall. In front of my customers. In front of children." The last word came out heavy, almost like it hurt him to say it. His tone shifted, low and dangerous. "Do you have children?" he asked suddenly. The woman swallowed hard. No. "That's probably why you don't understand," he said, stepping closer until his shadow fell over her. "You don't humiliate a mother for what she can't afford. You don't teach cruelty to her daughters. You don't laugh at someone's struggle." His words vibrated through the air, silencing everyone within earshot. The woman's face turned pale, her arrogance dissolving under his stare. I didn't know she was—" she began. But Alex didn't let her finish. "You didn't need to know," he said sharply. "You just needed to be human." Security guards appeared discreetly behind him, awaiting his orders. Alex's gaze didn't waver. "Escort her out," he said, then paused, his voice lowering to something colder. "But make sure she stops by the manager's office first. I want a full report on her behavior before she's banned from every Grant property." The blonde gasped softly. "Banned?" she repeated. "You can't—" "I can," he said simply. "And I just did." The guards moved forward, and she stumbled back, her eyes wide as she realized the scale of her mistake. "I'm sorry," she cried, her voice desperate now, but Alex didn't flinch. "Apologies mean nothing when they come after damage," he said, turning away. "Learn humility before life forces it on you." He walked away, his reflection merging with the glass walls, but his heart wasn't calm. Power couldn't erase the image of Liana's trembling hands, the tears on their daughter's cheeks. He pressed his palm briefly against the cool glass, his own reflection staring back, haunted. He whispered so softly that no one else could hear, "You were right here all along." His voice broke faintly at the end. He turned to his assistant. "Get me the CCTV footage from 15 minutes ago," he ordered. "Every angle, especially near the west entrance." The assistant nodded quickly and hurried off. Alex returned to his table, his untouched coffee now cold. He stared at it blankly, lost in the whirlpool of memory. He could still remember the way Liana's laughter used to echo in his apartment, the way she'd dance barefoot at midnight, teasing him for being too serious. He had loved her like a fire that never dimmed, and when she disappeared, he had convinced himself it was for the best, that she was better off without him. But seeing her again, seeing her broken, erased every illusion. His phone buzzed with a message. "Footage ready, sir." He rose immediately, his chair sliding back with a sharp sound. The security room was just down the hall, but each step felt heavier, his pulse thundering with dread and longing. When he entered, multiple screens flickered before him, one showing the exact moment Liana and the girls were insulted, another showing her walking away, her shoulders hunched, her daughters holding onto her. Alex's hand trembled as he reached toward the screen, his thumb brushing against her image like a man touching a ghost. "Liana," he murmured, voice cracking. "What did life do to you?" He stared at the footage of her daughters again, their small faces so familiar it hurt. "Amara," he whispered, naming one instinctively, though he didn't yet know which was which. The realization sank deeper. He wasn't just an absent lover. He was a father who had missed every first word, every birthday, every hug. Guilt tore through him until his knees almost gave out. "I failed you all," he breathed, sinking into the nearest chair. But then, slowly, his sorrow turned into resolve. He clenched his fists, his eyes darkening with determination. He stood again, straightening his jacket. "Find out where she went," he ordered the head of security. "Now." The man nodded and rushed to obey. Alex turned back to the monitors one last time, his heart aching as the camera showed Liana helping her daughters into a small old car. He watched until the screen faded into static. "This time," he said softly, his voice shaking yet resolute, "I'm not letting her disappear." The camera zoomed slowly on his engraved watch as his hand tightened at his side, the word family gleaming brighter than ever. Cliffhanger. His phone rang. He answered quietly, and a guard's voice came through. "Sir, we traced the vehicle registration. It's under the name Liana Brooks." Alex's eyes widened, his throat tightening as he whispered, "Brooks." His mind flashed back to the name she used before, Liana Grant. And for the first time in years, his voice broke completely. She still didn't change it. He looked toward the exit, his chest rising and falling with emotion. "Lockdown stays," he said darkly, "until I find her." The air inside the vast marble atrium of the Grant Mall had shifted from the hum of luxury to a charged silence thick enough to choke on. The chandeliers that once gleamed proudly above now seemed to dim, their golden light flickering faintly like they too could sense the storm that was about to break. Liana stood near the exit, one hand resting protectively on the car seat of her youngest daughter, while the other trembled slightly at her side. The automatic glass doors had stopped moving. The announcement had already gone off. Routine security check. But her heart told her something else entirely. Something, or someone, was behind this sudden lockdown. She turned slowly, her eyes scanning the glass walls, the floors gleaming under the fading light, and the faces frozen mid-whisper inside the mall. And then she saw movement. From the upper floor balcony, a figure was walking toward the escalator, every step deliberate, calm, but heavy with authority. He was tall, his black suit cutting through the crowd like a blade through silk. Inside the mall, murmurs began to ripple. Employees straightened, security guards stiffened to attention. Even the blonde woman, who moments ago had been basking in her cruel triumph, was now frowning, glancing nervously toward the approaching man. She didn't know who he was yet, but instinct told her that she had gone too far. He descended the escalator slowly, his posture unhurried but powerful, his eyes sharp and unreadable. The moment he stepped onto the marble floor, the crowd seemed to part naturally, as though the air itself bowed to his presence. Liana's breath caught in her throat when his gaze lifted briefly, sweeping the area before landing on her. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. Her pulse thundered in her ears as recognition sparked deep in her soul, a memory she had buried too long beginning to stir. "No, it can't be," she thought, shaking her head faintly. But those eyes, the piercing grey blue that used to look at her like she was his world, there was no mistaking them. The man walking toward her wasn't a stranger. He was the ghost of her past, the man she once loved, the man she ran from. Alex Grant walked forward, his every step echoing authority and controlled fury. The same guards who had stood idle earlier now followed him at a distance, unsure of what was about to unfold, but knowing instinctively that this wasn't just about security anymore. His eyes didn't move from the scene that had triggered everything, the blonde woman, pale now, her lips parting slightly as she realized just who was standing before her. Is that? Someone whispered nearby. "That's Alex Grant," another breathed. "The owner." The word rippled like electricity through the air. The blonde's painted smile faltered, her fingers twitching as she tried to fix her hair, but her confidence was gone. Alex stopped several feet away from her, his expression unreadable, yet his silence suffocating. "Is this how you treat guests in my mall?" he asked finally, his voice calm, too calm, each word slicing through the air like a razor's edge. The woman blinked rapidly, stammering, You're Maul?" Her voice cracked as realization dawned. "Mr. Grant, I didn't know—" "You didn't care to know," he interrupted, his tone dropping to something dangerously quiet. His eyes were cold steel now, his jaw tense. The blonde took a shaky step back, her confidence unraveling under the gaze of the man whose empire she had just desecrated. Liana stood frozen, her hand gripping the handle of the stroller as her daughters watched in silent confusion. The name Grant echoed in her mind like a forgotten song. Her chest tightened painfully as she slowly raised her eyes to meet his face. Time folded in on itself. The years that had separated them melted into nothing in that single moment of recognition. His eyes, still as intense as the night she had last seen him, met hers across the glittering floor. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling, barely audible yet cutting through the silence like a bell ringing through fog. He turned fully toward her then, the tension in his shoulders faltering for just a second as her voice washed over him. It was a sound he had dreamed of, imagined, cursed himself for losing, and now it was real again. His eyes softened imperceptibly, but beneath that softness was something deeper, something raw. Heartbreak, longing, and guilt intertwined. The world around them blurred. The crowd faded into shadows. All that existed in that suspended moment were two people who had once been everything to each other, and the three little girls who unknowingly tied them together forever. Liana's daughters watched silently, sensing the strange energy between their mother and the tall man in the suit. Amara tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Mommy, who is he?" Liana's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her throat was dry, her mind spinning. Alex took a slow step forward, his gaze shifting briefly to the children. When his eyes met theirs, something inside him cracked completely. Those same grey-blue eyes stared back at him, three reflections of his own soul. His breath hitched, and for a brief, shattering moment, the mighty Alex Grant, the man who could buy and sell empires, felt powerless. He drew in a shaky breath, his hand tightening into a fist by his side to keep his composure. His mind flooded with memories, the night Liana left, the unanswered letters, the endless search that had led nowhere. And now here she was, standing before him, her beauty softened by years but her strength still radiant, her daughters clinging to her like flowers blooming in the storm. The blonde woman tried to speak, her voice weak. "Mr. Grant, I swear I didn't—" "Enough," Alex said quietly, his eyes never leaving Liana. "You've said enough." The woman fell silent immediately, trembling as two security guards stepped closer. "Sir?" one guard asked softly, awaiting instruction. Alex's gaze finally broke from Liana, turning back toward the woman whose cruelty had ignited this entire chain of fate. His voice was calm, but each syllable carried venom. "Do you think humiliation makes you superior?" She shook her head frantically. "I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," he said, his tone ice cold. "And you said it in my mall. To my people." Her mouth opened to protest again, but Alex raised a single hand, and she fell silent instantly. The sheer dominance of that gesture sent a chill through everyone watching. He turned his head slightly toward the security team. "Escort her to the manager's office," he ordered. "Then make sure her access to every Grant property is revoked." Indefinitely, the blonde's knees nearly buckled. "Mr. Grant, please. I didn't know she was—" "Family," Alex finished for her, his voice deep and thunderous, the word echoing through the stunned silence of the mall. The crowd gasped softly. Liana's eyes widened in shock. "Family?" He looked at her again then, his gaze locking onto hers with unbearable intensity. The truth that had burned inside him since the moment he saw her finally slipped past his restraint. His next words dropped like thunder in the quiet air. "No one humiliates my family." The blonde woman's face drained of color, her breath catching as security took her by the arm. Liana's heart pounded so violently she thought it might burst. Her daughters looked up at her, confused, but sensing the change. Alex's words hung in the air, heavy, final, and intimate. "My family." The phrase echoed in her mind, colliding with the storm of memories she had tried to bury. His laughter, their love, the night she left, the secret she carried alone for all these years. Liana stumbled back a step, her eyes filling with tears she didn't want him to see. She whispered, "Alex, what are you saying?" But he didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched, his throat working as if the words were too heavy to push out. His gaze lingered on the three girls again, their identical eyes reflecting his own. His voice softened just slightly, enough for only her to hear. "You know what I'm saying." The crowd continued to murmur in disbelief, phones discreetly raised to capture the billionaire's rare display of emotion, but Alex didn't care. The rest of the world had faded away. All he saw was Liana, the woman he had once called home, and the daughters he had never known existed. His heart felt like it was shattering and healing all at once. He wanted to run to her, to touch her face, to hold his children, but his body refused to move, paralyzed between shock and awe. Liana blinked rapidly, her tears threatening to spill. She wanted to speak, to explain, to run, to stay, all at once. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered shakily, glancing toward the humiliated woman being led away. "You didn't have to—" "Yes," he interrupted softly. "I did." His tone was final, his eyes still burning with the fury of a man who had seen the woman he loved mocked in front of their children. "This mall, this world, everything I built, it means nothing if people like her can make you feel small in it." His words hit her harder than she expected. She hadn't heard his voice in years, but it still carried that same depth, that same warmth buried beneath control. It stirred something inside her she had tried to forget. Her daughters clung to her legs, their big eyes flicking between the two adults, sensing a truth they couldn't name. The tension in the air felt alive. Security cleared the bystanders slowly, but no one dared to speak. Alex took another small step closer, his gaze never leaving Liana's face. The distance between them was only a few feet now, but it felt like years of silence and pain stretched between. "You left without a word," he said quietly, so low she could barely hear it, "and yet fate brings you here, to me, to this moment." Liana's lips parted, trembling, her mind spinning between guilt and disbelief. "I had to," she whispered brokenly. But before she could explain, he took another step forward, his voice dark with emotion. "Had to hide my children from me." His question sliced through the air, low but heavy with hurt. Her tears finally fell, silent but endless. The girls looked up at her, confused by the word children, but Liana couldn't speak. The truth was unraveling faster than she could hold it back. Alex's face softened then, his fury giving way to heartbreak. He exhaled shakily, one hand briefly covering his face as he struggled to steady himself. When he looked up again, his eyes glistened with something raw. "You didn't deserve that humiliation," he said softly, "and neither did they." The mall lights flickered once more, and the entire place seemed to hold its breath. Liana's heart raced, torn between fear and the ghost of the love she once knew. Alex took one final step closer, until only inches separated them. His voice lowered to a whisper only she could hear. "You may have forgotten me, Liana," he said, his voice trembling, "but I never stopped searching for you." The words left her paralyzed, her tears falling freely now as memories of the past swarmed her mind. His touch, his laughter, the promise they once made beneath the stars. And before she could respond, his final words broke the silence again, each syllable like thunder rolling through her soul. "No one humiliates my family," he repeated, but this time it wasn't anger, it was a vow to protect, a vow to reclaim what fate had stolen. And as the crowd's whispers faded into stunned silence, Liana realized that nothing about her life would ever be the same again. 4. Gasps rippled through the polished marble hall as Alex's words thundered across the air, his declaration cutting through the shocked murmurs like a lightning strike in a silent sky. For a moment, even the sound of the fountain seemed to fade, and all eyes fixed on him, the man whose presence commanded the world around him. The blonde woman's smirk collapsed into horror as realization spread across her perfectly powdered face. She had mocked the wrong person, insulted the wrong family. Liana stood frozen, her breath shallow, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear nothing else. Her triplets clung to her skirt, trembling, their wide, innocent eyes darting between the angry crowd and the tall man who had just called them his family. The word echoed inside her head, shattering every wall she had built to protect herself. "Your family?" she whispered, disbelief cracking her voice. Alex's expression shifted, the sharpness in his eyes softening as his gaze met hers, eyes that once knew every corner of her soul. The look he gave her wasn't one of arrogance, but of recognition, longing and guilt, intertwined so tightly that it hurt to even meet his stare. "We need to talk," he said, in a low, calm tone that carried the weight of years of silence and loss. Security guards stood frozen, waiting for orders, while the blonde woman stumbled backward, trying to compose herself. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice brittle with humiliation. But one glance from Alex's piercing eyes silenced her instantly as two guards stepped closer, their postures sharp as steel. The crowd began to murmur again, phones raised, but Alex's security swiftly ushered everyone away, the scene dissolving into whispers and confusion. Liana still couldn't move, her legs heavy, her chest aching as she tried to process what was happening. Alex turned to her gently. "Please," he murmured, "come with me. Let's talk privately." He led her through the quiet corridors of the upper floor, the echo of their footsteps amplifying the heavy tension between them. Each step felt like walking back through time, back to the days when love had been their only language, before pain and separation had rewritten their story. Liana's thoughts spiraled with unanswered questions, fear, and the faint flicker of hope she was afraid to feel. When they reached his office, the doors opened automatically, revealing a sleek interior filled with soft golden light and walls lined with success, a symbol of the man he had become. Yet even surrounded by wealth, there was a haunting loneliness that clung to the air. He closed the door gently behind them, turning toward her with a look that stripped away his billionaire armor, revealing a man haunted by regret. Liana's tears broke free as she faced him. "Why now, Alex?" she asked, her voice shaking, her hands trembling against her chest. "After all these years, why show up when I've learned to live without you? Why let me suffer alone when you could have found me before?" The pain in her words hit him harder than any blow could. He lowered his gaze, jaw clenched, then whispered, "Because I never stopped looking for you. I searched every city, every lead, every rumor, but it was like you vanished into air." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotion he had buried for so long. "Every night I'd look at the stars and ask myself if you were safe, if the children, our children, were alive, and I hated myself for not being there." Liana wiped her tears, staring at him with disbelief and anger intertwined. "You had every resource, every connection. You could have found anyone if you truly wanted to," she said bitterly, But when I needed you most, you were gone." Alex took a step closer, his eyes searching hers with quiet desperation. "Liana, someone kept you hidden from me," he said, voice low and trembling with restrained rage. "Every time I got close, the trail went cold. I thought you had left me by choice. I thought you didn't want this life anymore." Liana's heart squeezed painfully at his words, but before she could respond, a faint knock on the glass wall interrupted them. His head of security, Marcus, stood outside with a nervous expression. Alex turned sharply. "Not now," he said. But Marcus didn't leave. He pointed at Alex's phone on the desk, flashing insistently. A vibration buzzed through the silence. Alex frowned, picked it up, and the color drained from his face as he read the message glowing on the screen. "If you expose the truth, they'll all suffer." The words sliced through the moment like a blade. He froze, his eyes narrowing as the room's atmosphere shifted from emotional to dangerous. Liana noticed the sudden tension and stepped forward cautiously. "What is it?" she asked, voice trembling. He didn't answer immediately, his jaw tightening as his thumb hovered over the message. His chest rose and fell faster, his heartbeat pounding audibly in the silence. "Alex," she pressed again. "What's wrong?" He exhaled slowly, placing the phone face down on the desk, his mind racing. "Nothing you need to worry about," he said softly, but the edge in his tone betrayed him. Liana moved closer, placing her hand over his arm gently. "Don't lie to me," she said, eyes pleading. "After everything, don't start with lies again." His hand clenched into a fist before he relaxed, meeting her gaze. "Someone doesn't want me to tell you what really happened," he admitted finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, panic starting to grow in her chest. "What truth?" His silence was heavy, and for a moment, the hum of the city lights below was the only sound between them. "The truth about why you disappeared," he said quietly, his words slow, deliberate, filled with pain. "And who made sure we never saw each other again?" Liana's lips parted, confusion and fear mingling. "Are you saying someone kept us apart?" Alex nodded, eyes dark and determined. "Yes, and whoever it is, they're still watching." Mini cliffhanger after mini cliffhanger unfolded in her mind as she realized the depth of what he implied. Her thoughts tangled with the memory of the hospital years ago, when everything went wrong, when she woke up alone, told that Alex had abandoned her. Could it have been a lie? Could someone have stolen their future for reasons she didn't yet understand? She stared at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Who?" she asked. "Who would do that?" But Alex didn't answer. He turned toward the window, staring down at the city glowing beneath the night sky, the reflection of his haunted face flickering in the glass. "I don't know yet," he said, "but I intend to find out." Liana's mind reeled as her daughter's laughter from downstairs faintly echoed through the vents, a reminder of the innocents caught in the crossfire of adult secrets. "If there's danger, we shouldn't stay here," she said urgently, glancing toward the door. But Alex shook his head, his voice calm yet unyielding. "You're safest here," he said. "No one can touch you in this building. It's mine." His words were both protective and terrifying, a mix of power and vulnerability that made her chest tighten. "But who sent that message?" she asked again. "What truth are they trying to stop?" Alex's phone buzzed again, another message appearing before he could even answer. "You were warned. Next time, we won't just send words." His blood ran cold. He turned the phone around, showing her the message. Liana's hand flew to her mouth as fear gripped her heart. "Oh my God!" she whispered. Alex's expression hardened, the fire in his eyes reigniting. "They think they can scare me," he said, voice low and deadly. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." The transformation in him was magnetic, his calm demeanor replaced by the fierce determination of a man ready to protect what he loved at any cost. He moved closer to Liana, his gaze burning into hers. "Whoever's behind this," he vowed, "I'll destroy them before they ever come near you or our girls again." The air between them grew thick with emotion, love, fear, and the weight of unfinished history. Liana's heart raced as she saw the man she once loved standing before her, not as the stranger she feared, but as the protector she once trusted. Her tears shimmered, reflecting the dim light of the office as she whispered, "You've changed." He gave a faint, sorrowful smile. "Maybe, but one thing hasn't," he said softly. "I still love you." The words hit her like a storm, bringing both warmth and chaos to her heart. Before she could respond, another sharp vibration from his phone broke the fragile moment. The same unknown number had sent one more chilling message. "You have 24 hours. Stay silent, or watch everything you love disappear." The cliffhanger thickened, the tension rising as Alex's eyes darkened, the reflection of the message glowing in his pupils. Liana stepped back, fear creeping up her spine as she whispered, "What are they planning?" He turned toward her, his voice firm, filled with a terrifying calm. "Whatever it is," he said, "they just made their biggest mistake." The glass wall behind them suddenly cracked faintly, just enough to make both of them turn sharply, proof that someone was already watching. 5. The faint crack on the glass hadn't even faded when Alex's phone began to vibrate again, a low hum that pierced through the heavy silence in the office. He gripped it tightly, his knuckles white, his eyes scanning every corner of the room. He could feel it, a presence, something invisible yet heavy, watching, listening. The air felt colder now, sharp with tension. Liana's pulse quickened as she stepped closer, her voice trembling but gentle. "Alex, what is it? Who sent those messages?" Her question broke through the stillness like a fragile note. He didn't look at her right away, his gaze fixed on the reflection of the city lights outside. "Nothing I can't handle," he murmured, but his voice carried a subtle crack that betrayed the storm brewing inside him. Liana wasn't convinced. She watched his eyes move, sharp and calculating, scanning the corners of the office as though expecting something or someone to appear. The light flickered once and her heart jumped. "You're scaring me," she whispered. He turned then, forcing a reassuring half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I won't let anything happen to you or the girls," he said quietly. But the conviction in his words was shadowed by fear, the kind of fear that only comes from knowing what true enemies are capable of. Down below, the mall had emptied. Security guards swept the corridors, but unknown to them, one camera feed remained active, hidden deep within the system, rerouted to a private network. On the other end of that feed, Sabrina leaned back in her chair, her blood-red lips curling into a smirk as she watched the grainy image of Alex pacing in his office. Her manicured fingers traced the edge of a wine glass. "So, Alex Grant still thinks he's untouchable," she murmured, eyes glittering with venom. Behind her, monitors displayed files, photos, and a digital map of the city, with one point flashing red, the penthouse where Alex lived. "Let's see how long you can protect your precious little family," she whispered darkly, sipping her wine. Her voice was soft, almost seductive, but her eyes were as cold as steel. Sabrina had once been Alex's business rival and, once upon a time, something far more personal. But that was before betrayal, before power and jealousy turned her heart into ice. Meanwhile, back in the penthouse, the night had settled like a thick, suffocating blanket. Liana tucked the triplets, Amara, Mia, and Nia, into their beds, her gentle voice humming an old lullaby as the girls drifted to sleep. Their faces looked so peaceful, unaware of the danger tightening around them like invisible chains. Liana brushed a strand of hair from Amara's forehead and whispered, "Mommy loves you," before turning off the lamp. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Cars, lights, laughter. But inside, the silence was heavy, almost too still. When she returned to the living room, she found Alex standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, the skyline stretching before him like a battlefield of glowing towers. He didn't turn when she approached. His reflection looked tense, shoulders squared, eyes unreadable. "You're still thinking about the messages," she said softly, stepping beside him. "You can't hide it from me, Alex." "I know that look." He exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the glass. "I've dealt with threats before," he said quietly. "But this one, it feels different." His tone was low, almost as if he was speaking to himself. "Who would want to hurt you?" she asked. He hesitated, his silence speaking volumes. "People who know me," he said finally. "People who know how to strike where it hurts the most." Liana's brow furrowed as she searched his face. "You mean—" "Yes," he cut in sharply. "Someone from my past." His jaw tightened. "And they won't stop until they take everything." A chill ran down Liana's spine. She remembered the cold message from earlier, the way Alex's face had gone pale when he read it. Whoever this was, they weren't bluffing. "Maybe we should leave the city," she whispered urgently. "Just until it's safe." Alex turned toward her, his eyes burning with defiance. "Running gives them power," he said firmly. "If I show fear, they'll know they've won. I've built empires, Liana. I won't let anyone tear down the one thing that truly matters now." She opened her mouth to argue, but the intensity in his gaze silenced her. He reached out and took her hand, holding it tightly. "I lost you once," he said, voice low and fierce. "I won't lose you or our girls again. I swear it." His words vibrated with raw emotion, and for a brief second, the fear in her heart eased. But outside, somewhere across the city, Sabrina's laughter echoed softly through her hidden room of screens. Sabrina pressed a button on her remote, zooming in on the live feed of the penthouse. Her smirk widened as she watched the triplets sleeping peacefully. "You really should have stayed away, Alex," she whispered, her tone laced with dark amusement. "Now your past will destroy your future." Back in the penthouse, the digital clock struck midnight. Alex finally stepped away from the window and walked toward his private office, the floor creaking under his polished shoes. He sat at his desk, his mind spinning. Files were spread across the surface, company reports, security footage, encrypted emails. He tapped into the system, searching for the source of the earlier messages. His fingers moved quickly, his focus sharp. Suddenly, a strange code appeared on the screen. Encrypted, foreign but familiar. It was the same digital signature used years ago by a corporate rival during a hostile takeover attempt. His chest tightened. "Sabrina," he whispered under his breath. The name alone made the air feel colder. He leaned back, piecing everything together. The threats, the timing, the camera feeds, the humiliation at the mall. This wasn't random. It was orchestrated. Sabrina had returned, and she had found his weakness. Meanwhile, in the bedroom, Liana stirred restlessly. She couldn't sleep, her mind plagued by the tension in Alex's face. She rose quietly, walking barefoot down the hallway, her silk nightgown brushing against the marble floor. The light from his office glowed under the door. She paused, then gently pushed it open. "Still awake?" she asked softly. Alex looked up, exhaustion shadowing his eyes. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. She walked closer, noticing the lines of worry etched into his expression. "You think it's her, don't you?" Liana asked, her voice cautious. He nodded slowly. "Sabrina Hayes," he said, the name heavy on his tongue. "She used to be one of my biggest investors before she tried to destroy everything I built. When she couldn't, she swore she'd make me pay." Liana's hand covered her mouth. "You think she's behind all this?" "I know she is," he said grimly. Before Liana could respond, a soft beep echoed from his computer, an incoming live feed. The monitor flickered, showing a grainy video of their apartment building. The camera panned across the empty street and then stopped on a dark SUV parked across the road, its headlights off. A figure inside lifted a phone, the screen glowing faintly. Alex froze, recognizing the number on his caller ID. It was the same one that had sent the threatening messages. He bolted upright, grabbing his phone, but before he could trace the call, the feed went black. Liana gasped, her hand gripping his arm. "They're watching us," she whispered. Alex's pulse thundered in his ears as he muttered, "Let them watch. They'll regret it." But beneath his cold fury, the thought of danger near his daughters ignited a fear he could barely contain. He immediately called Marcus. "Double the security at the school tomorrow," he ordered. "No one gets near the girls." Marcus's firm voice came through the line. "Consider it done." But even as Alex hung up, a nagging unease clung to his chest. Something didn't feel right. The night dragged on, long and restless. Alex sat awake until dawn, staring at the city below. He could almost feel Sabrina's eyes somewhere out there, calculating, waiting. When the morning light broke through the clouds, it felt like a fragile promise of peace that neither of them truly believed. Down the hallway, Liana was helping the triplets get ready for school, their laughter bright and innocent, a stark contrast to the shadows hanging over them. Amara giggled as she tied Mia's shoelaces, while Nia clutched her small backpack decorated with stars. "Daddy's going to pick us up later, right?" Nia asked cheerfully. Liana smiled softly, brushing her hair. "Of course, baby." Alex appeared at the doorway, his tie undone, his smile faint but warm. "Have a great day, my angels," he said, kissing each of them on the forehead. For a fleeting moment, everything felt normal, like the family he'd always dreamed of having. But as the girls waved goodbye and left with the driver, an unease lingered in his gut, twisting tighter with every passing second. He told himself it was paranoia, the residue of a sleepless night. He told himself they were safe. But deep down, he knew better. Miles away, Sabrina watched from her penthouse, her reflection mirrored in the glass as she murmured to the man standing beside her, "It's time." The man nodded and walked out, his face hidden in shadows. She turned back to the screen, where the feed now showed the triplets' school. "Checkmate, Alex," she whispered, her smile cold and merciless. By mid-morning, Alex received a call from Marcus, but his voice wasn't steady this time. "Sir," he said, breathless, "you need to come to the school." Now Alex's stomach dropped. "What happened?" he demanded. The line crackled with static before Marcus's voice came through again, shaking. "The girls, they're gone." The world tilted. The phone slipped slightly in his hand as every sound around him seemed to vanish. He couldn't breathe. Liana's laughter from earlier echoed in his memory, followed by the image of their daughters waving goodbye. His vision blurred with rage and fear. "What do you mean, gone?" he hissed. "They vanished during recess," Marcus said. "No one saw who took them." "The cameras. They've all been wiped." Alex's voice dropped to a deadly whisper as he stared out the window, his reflection cold as stone. "Sabrina," he muttered, "you've crossed a line you'll never come back from." 6. The phone call came like a scream from the edge of the world, a shattering sound that ripped through the quiet air of the mall office, where tension already lingered like smoke. Liana's trembling hand clutched the phone as her knees went weak, her voice breaking as she gasped, "What do you mean they're missing? What do you mean my daughters didn't get home?" Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard she could barely breathe, and tears flooded her eyes before she even understood the full words spoken to her. Across the room, Alex's head snapped up instantly, his entire body freezing before a storm surged within him. He strode toward her, his tone sharp with authority and fear all at once. Liana, what happened? She could barely form the words, her lips quivering. Amara, Mia, and Nia, they're gone. The school says they were picked up early, but it wasn't me. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then chaos erupted. Alex's blood turned to ice, his mind already racing ahead, seeing only the black threat of danger circling the only people that mattered to him. No, he whispered, his voice low and dangerous, the sound of a man whose world was suddenly at risk of collapsing again. He moved fast, snatching his phone, his voice turning into steel as he barked orders to his security team. Pull every camera feed from the school, from every road within a 5-mile radius. Contact the police chief and activate private protocol. I want eyes everywhere. His fingers flew across his screen, connecting with his top investigator, his tech division, his security chief. The air inside the office was electric with panic and command. Liana stood in the middle of it, her chest heaving, her face pale with terror. Alex. My babies, she whispered helplessly, her voice breaking in a way that nearly destroyed him. He crossed the room, catching her as she staggered, his hands gripping her arms, his eyes locking with hers, dark, intense, and filled with something primal. We'll find them, Liana, he said through clenched teeth, his voice low, vibrating with restrained rage and conviction. I swear to you, I'll bring them back. No one touches what's mine. Liana's sobs echoed against the glass walls, her thoughts spinning, flashes of her daughter's laughter breaking through the fear like shards of light that only made the darkness deeper. She remembered their smiles that morning, their small hands waving goodbye, and the guilt stabbed through her like a knife. I should have gone with them, she whispered, sinking to her knees. But Alex knelt beside her instantly, grabbing her shoulders firmly. Don't do that to yourself, he said, his voice thick with emotion, a command wrapped in tenderness. This isn't your fault. This is mine. The words surprised her, and her tear-filled eyes met his, confusion mixing with pain. Yours? Why would... Because someone's trying to hurt me, he interrupted darkly, his gaze flickering toward the phone where he had received the anonymous message the night before. If you expose the truth, they'll all suffer. His jaw clenched as his mind connected the dots. Sabrina. The realization hit him like fire. Sabrina had been waiting, watching, striking where it would hurt most. She's behind this, he muttered, rising to his feet. His men began streaming in, bringing tablets with live feeds from school cameras. One screen froze, showing a grainy image of a black van idling by the gates, then pulling off moments after the triplets had exited. Alex's eyes went cold. Zoom in, he ordered, and when the image sharpened just enough to show a blurred silhouette of a woman near the driver's seat, his worst fear solidified. The cold smile, the posture, it was unmistakable. Sabrina. The realization poured gasoline on his fury. He slammed his palm against the desk, the sound echoing through the office like a gunshot. She took them, he said, his voice low and venomous, a promise rather than a statement. Liana covered her mouth, her sobs muffled as she shook her head. Why would she do this? They're just children. Alex's eyes burned as he whispered, because she wants to break me. His words dripped with guilt and rage. For years he had built an empire of glass and steel, guarded it with ruthless power, but he had never realized the cost would one day be his own blood. His phone buzzed again, a voice message this time. He pressed play. Sabrina's laughter filled the air, smooth and sharp, like the sound of evil purring. Let's see how strong your love really is, Alex. You took what I wanted. Now I'm taking what's yours. Liana gasped, grabbing his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve as she shook. She knows about me. About them. Alex's gaze softened briefly, guilt and determination colliding in his chest. She knows everything. I should have ended this war long ago, he muttered bitterly, but I won't let her win. He turned back to his men. Get me every route out of the city monitored. Send drones. Freeze her accounts. Track the van's license plates. His voice became pure authority, the voice of a man who ruled cities, who could bend the world to his will if he had to. Yet beneath that cold surface burned something far deeper, a father's terror, a lover's desperate heartbeat. Minutes passed like hours as they scanned through footage, tracked GPS signals, cross-referenced traffic data. Then a signal blinked to life, an abandoned warehouse near the docks. "We've got movement there," one of the guards reported. Alex didn't hesitate. "Send 2 teams." "I'm going myself," Liana caught his hand. "No, Alex, you can't just go in there." Her fear poured out of her eyes, but his gaze held hers steady, unwavering. "I have to, Liana. Those are my daughters. Our daughters." The way he said it made her heart twist. His tone wasn't commanding, it was raw, vulnerable, almost broken. "You stay here," he said softly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I'll bring them back to you. I promise." But even as he turned to leave, her gut screamed something was wrong. The air felt heavy, too still, too staged. She reached for him again, her voice trembling. "Alex, wait. What if it's a trap?" He paused at the door, her words hanging between them like a warning from fate itself. His jaw flexed, his mind torn between instinct and emotion. "If it is," he said finally, "then I'll walk into it and tear it apart myself." Downstairs, the sound of engines roared as his convoy sped out into the night, red and blue lights flashing across the city streets. The wind cut through his suit as he stood by the open door of the lead vehicle, his phone in one hand, his other clenching into a fist. Every second mattered. He could almost hear the girls' laughter echoing in his head, their tiny voices calling for him, and that sound alone drove him forward with a fire that nothing could extinguish. Back at the office, Liana stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer below. Her heart begged her to believe his promise, but a chill crawled down her spine. Hours stretched thin as her tears fell silently, her prayers whispering into the night. The office door creaked open suddenly, and she spun around, expecting Alex, but it was one of his men, pale-faced and anxious. "Ma'am," he said nervously, "we just intercepted a live signal. It's coming from Sabrina." Liana's pulse raced as she stumbled forward. "What do you mean, live signal?" The guard swallowed. "It's a video broadcast." To Alex's private phone, her stomach dropped as she realized what that meant. Far away, Alex's phone buzzed in his hand as he stood outside the warehouse, his men surrounding him with weapons drawn. The screen lit up, and there it was, a live video feed. His blood froze. The image flickered before stabilizing, and then she appeared. Sabrina, smiling with cruel satisfaction, holding one of the triplets in her arms. The little girl's face streaked with tears, her voice muffled by a gag. Alex's knees nearly buckled as he stared at the screen. The cold city wind howled around him, his pulse deafening in his ears. Sabrina's voice purred through the speakers. "Welcome to my game, Alex. Let's see if the great billionaire can save his family before I decide the rules change." And as the screen zoomed in on his daughter's terrified eyes, Alex felt his world teeter on the edge of collapse, his fury boiling over, his promise to protect them burning fiercer than ever, because now it wasn't just a rescue mission, it was war. The live feed flickered again, and Sabrina whispered, "You have 1 hour to find them, or you lose one forever." The night split open with the roar of engines as Alex's convoy tore through the rain-slicked streets, sirens wailing behind him and fear pounding in his chest like a war drum. His phone was still glowing in his hand, Sabrina's voice slithering through the speakers, her taunting words digging deep under his skin. "You have 1 hour to find them, or you lose one forever." Every second felt like a blade twisting in his chest, every breath a countdown. Liana's voice echoed in his mind, her cries, her pleading, and he gripped the wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. "Hold on, my girls," he whispered through clenched teeth, his voice breaking. "Daddy's coming." His security chief spoke through the comms. "Sir, we've located the signal." "It's coming from the abandoned Harkins warehouse at the docks." Alex's heart slammed against his ribs. "Move," he commanded sharply. "Seal off the perimeter. No one gets in or out." The city blurred past in streaks of light and shadow, the rain drumming harder, as if the world itself mirrored his rage. He could barely breathe thinking of his daughters in that cold, dark place, terrified, alone. Liana's voice crackled over the speaker, desperate. "Alex, please don't let anything happen to them." Her sobs cut straight into his soul, and he answered in a low, determined growl, "I won't. I swear, Liana, I won't lose them again." His men exchanged tense looks, knowing the fury in their boss's tone was not just anger, it was the wrath of a father. When they arrived at the warehouse, the air was thick with dread. Rusted metal walls loomed over them, the faint flicker of a dying light bulb swinging from the ceiling like a haunting heartbeat. Alex stepped out into the darkness, his breath fogging in the cold night air, his black coat whipping behind him in the wind. The silence was unnatural, too heavy, too planned. His instincts screamed that Sabrina wanted him to come, that she had orchestrated every step, but he didn't care. His daughters were inside, and nothing, no trap, no threat, no bullet, was going to stop him. "Team 1, go left. Team 2, cover the rear. I'm going in," he ordered, his voice a mix of steel and storm. Inside, the warehouse was an echo chamber of despair. Crates stacked high, shadows stretching like claws. Every creak made his heart lurch. His flashlight beams sliced through the dark, illuminating broken glass, rope, and faint footprints. Then he heard it, soft crying, so faint it barely reached his ears. "Daddy!" The voice was small, trembling, but it hit him like thunder. "Amara!" he shouted, his voice raw, echoing off the steel walls. He ran toward the sound, his pulse roaring in his ears. "Mia! Nia! It's Daddy!" The moment his daughters' names left his lips, he heard a second voice, low, mocking. "Well, look who finally decided to play hero." Sabrina's voice. It came from above, her silhouette framed against the catwalk, the glint of a gun in her hand. Her laughter drifted down like poison. "You always did love a dramatic entrance," she sneered, her tone laced with venom and heartbreak. "If only you had fought this hard for me." Alex's jaw tightened, his eyes burning with fury. "Don't talk to me about love," he spat, stepping closer to the center of the room. "You don't know the meaning of it." He heard movement to his right and turned sharply. Two men emerged from the shadows, guns raised. Sabrina smirked. "Careful now, Alex. One wrong move, and your little fairy tale ends right here." Alex's heart pounded as he scanned the shadows. And there, behind a pile of crates, he saw them. His three little girls, bound but unharmed, their tear-streaked faces lighting up the moment they saw him. "Daddy!" they cried in unison, their voices cracking with both fear and relief. The sound nearly broke him. "It's okay," he whispered, barely holding back tears. "I'm here, my loves." "Daddy's here." Sabrina rolled her eyes mockingly. "Touching," she said coldly, "but let's make this interesting." Before she could finish, Alex moved like lightning. He lunged toward the nearest gunman, knocking the weapon from his grip with a brutal strike. A struggle erupted. The second man fired, the bullet grazing Alex's arm, but he didn't flinch. He tackled the attacker to the ground, disarming him with a swift blow, then pointed the gun at Sabrina's feet. "Let them go," he barked. "Now!" His voice boomed through the warehouse like a command from hell itself. Sabrina smirked, her finger twitching on the trigger of her pistol. "Still the same Alex," she taunted, "always thinking you can control everything." Meanwhile, Liana, who had defied his order and followed the convoy, crept through the side entrance, her heart in her throat. She saw the chaos unfold, the gunmen, the terrified girls, the woman with the cold, cruel smile. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just moved. As Sabrina turned her attention back to Alex, Liana dashed toward the girls, untying their ropes, whispering urgently, "It's okay, babies. Mommy's here." Tears streamed down their faces as they clung to her. "We were so scared, Mommy," cried Mia. "I know, sweetheart, I know," Liana whispered, her voice breaking. "We're going home." Alex noticed them just in time. Liana and the girls crouching behind the crates, and his heart surged with both terror and relief. He turned his fury back on Sabrina. "This ends now," he growled. Sabrina's expression twisted with bitterness. "You think you can walk away with everything? After what you did to me?" she screamed, her voice cracking with rage. "You took my company, my name, my power, and now you have the family I could never have." Her tears glistened under the dim lights, madness flickering in her eyes. "You ruined me, Alex." He took a slow, deliberate step forward, his voice steady, his eyes like steel. "You ruined yourself, Sabrina. You chose greed over love. You chose hate over peace. But you'll never hurt them again." Then, as if the air itself held its breath, everything happened at once. One of the guards lunged toward Sabrina. She fired wildly, the gunshot echoing like thunder. The bullet shattered glass, and sparks rained down from a light fixture. Alex dived, pulling Sabrina's accomplice to the ground and punching him hard across the face. Liana screamed as smoke filled the room, and Alex yelled, "Get them out, now!" His men rushed to shield Liana and the girls, ushering them toward the exit. Sabrina stumbled backward, cornered now, her gun trembling as she aimed it at Alex. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You'll never know peace." Alex's voice was cold as stone. "I already lost peace the day I lost them, but I'm taking it back tonight." He lunged forward, disarming her with a swift twist of her wrist. The gun clattered across the floor. She gasped in pain, collapsing to her knees as he glared down at her, chest heaving. For a second there was silence, the storm before the storm. Then he turned toward the exit where his family waited, calling, "It's over, Liana. I've got them." But as the words left his lips, a metallic click broke the fragile relief. Time slowed. Sabrina had pulled a second gun from her boot, her hand shaking but her aim steady. Her eyes burned with hatred as she hissed, "Happy ending?" Not yet. The barrel of the gun glinted under the flickering light, and it was aimed directly at Liana's back. The metallic click of the gunshot sliced through the air like lightning, sharp, final, merciless. The world seemed to stop breathing. Alex's instincts exploded into motion before thought could even form. He spun around, his arms wrapping around Liana, pulling her tight against his chest as his body twisted to shield her. Then came the deafening crack of the bullet, a sound that felt like it split the earth in half. Liana screamed as Alex's body jerked from the impact, the force sending them both staggering backward. The scent of gunpowder filled the air, harsh and metallic, mingling with the faint smell of rain, leaking through the broken roof. Sabrina's scream tore through the chaos, a cry of rage and frustration, the sound of a cornered soul losing her final battle. "Alex!" Liana's cry echoed in the hollow warehouse as she dropped to her knees, catching him before he fell. His hand pressed against his shoulder, blood seeping through his shirt, warm and dark against her trembling fingers. "No, no, no," she whispered frantically, her tears falling on his face as she cupped his cheek. "Stay with me, please. You promised." He winced, but managed a weak, reassuring smile, his voice low but steady even as pain rippled through him. "Liana," he murmured, his breath ragged. "I told you, I'll never leave again." His hand found hers, squeezing it with a strength that made her heart break all over again. The next moment erupted in chaos. Alex's security team stormed the warehouse, their shouts blending with the echo of boots and orders. "Weapon down! Don't move!" one barked, as others surrounded Sabrina, who stood frozen for a moment before snarling like a trapped animal. Her mascara streaked down her face, her hair disheveled, her once perfect composure shattered. "You think this is over?" she screamed as they seized her arms. "You have no idea what's coming. You ruined me, Alex. You stole everything." Her voice cracked, breaking into a mix of fury and madness. "You can't buy forgiveness. You can't buy love." Alex, still clutching his shoulder, glared at her, his voice rough but full of cold control. "I didn't ruin you, Sabrina. You did that to yourself. All I ever wanted was peace, but you turned it into war." Sabrina struggled against the guards, her voice rising in a shriek. "You'll regret this, Alex Grant. I'll come back for you, for all of you." But her words were swallowed by the heavy thud of boots as they dragged her out, her screams fading into the distance. Liana watched, trembling, clutching Alex's arm as if letting go would break her forever. The triplets, Amara, Mia, and Nia, emerged from behind the crates, their small faces pale, streaked with tears. "Daddy!" they cried together, running toward him. Alex, despite the pain, forced himself to kneel, his arms opening wide to embrace them. He pulled them close, holding all three against his chest, his tears finally breaking free. "You're safe now," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You're safe, my angels." Liana knelt beside him, her arms wrapping around them all, and for a moment in that dark, broken warehouse, love itself felt like light, burning away the fear, the anger, the years of silence and distance. Outside, sirens wailed as the police cars arrived, flashing red and blue across the cracked concrete. Paramedics rushed in, and Alex tried to stand, his legs unsteady, but Liana held him firmly. "You're hurt," she whispered, her eyes searching his face desperately. "You need to rest." He shook his head, determination flickering in his gaze. "Not until I know you're all safe." His voice was weak but fierce, his eyes glimmering with the unbreakable will that made him who he was. She touched his cheek softly, her thumb brushing away a drop of blood mixed with rain. "We're safe," she said gently, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Because of you." As the paramedics cleaned his wound and bandaged his shoulder, he refused to lie down. His hand never let go of hers. "You've changed, Alex," she whispered, her voice tender, full of awe. "You're not the same man who walked away years ago." He looked at her, his eyes soft with pain, and something deeper, redemption. "I was blind back then," he said quietly. "I thought power meant control. I thought success would fill the emptiness. But when I lost you, I realized I lost myself too." Her heart swelled, every wound of the past reopening only to be healed by his words. "I wanted to hate you," she admitted, tears falling freely now. "But I couldn't. Every time I looked at our daughters, I saw you in them. And I prayed that somehow, someday, you'd come back." He reached out, his fingers brushing against her cheek with a tenderness that made her shiver. "And now that I've found you," he murmured, "nothing, no past, no enemy, no pain, will ever take you away from me again." The triplets clung tighter, their small voices whispering, "Daddy, don't go." He kissed each of their foreheads gently, whispering, "Never again, my loves. Never again." Outside, the rain had stopped and dawn began to break over the horizon. The sky glowed faintly gold, a fragile symbol of new beginnings. The warehouse, once a place of danger, now felt like the ground where their family had been reborn, through pain, through courage, through love. Liana looked up at the sunrise, her hand entwined with Alex's, her voice trembling as she said softly, "It's over." Alex nodded slowly, though his eyes were distant, thoughtful, as if he knew that peace, for people like them, was never that simple. Hours later, back at the Grant mansion, the atmosphere had shifted, from terror to relief. The triplets were wrapped in blankets, sipping hot chocolate as Liana brushed their hair and kissed their foreheads. Alex stood by the window, his bandaged shoulder aching, his mind replaying every moment of the confrontation. He had nearly lost everything again, but this time he had fought, and he had won. Yet deep down, something unsettled him. The way Sabrina had screamed her final words, the promise of revenge, echoed in his head like a storm waiting to return. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. One of his security guards entered, his expression tense but composed. "Sir," he said, extending a gloved hand, "this was delivered just now." "No sender, but it's marked for you." Alex frowned, taking the sealed envelope. The paper was thick, elegant, and embossed with red wax, the kind only Sabrina would use. His heart tightened as he read the words written across the front. "From Sabrina, round 2. Liana noticed the shift in his expression immediately, her smile fading. "What is it?" she asked, rising from the couch. Alex's fingers trembled slightly as he turned the envelope in his hands. The weight of it felt heavy, too deliberate, too familiar. "A message," he said quietly, his voice grim. "From her." The triplets looked up, their eyes wide, sensing the tension. Liana's hand found his, her grip firm, her voice soft but steady. "We'll face it together," she said, her tone carrying both love and strength. Alex met her gaze, the fire returning to his eyes. "Together," he agreed. But as he stared down at the seal, unbroken and crimson like blood, a chill swept through him. Sabrina might have been defeated, but the war she had started was far from over. As thunder rolled in the distance, Alex tore open the envelope, and his face went pale as he read the first line. "You saved them once, Alex. But can you save them again?" The echo of sirens had barely faded when the world seemed to slow around them, replaced by the hum of whispers, flashing cameras, and the weight of emotions too large for words. The city had already begun spinning stories about the man who fought through fire and danger to save his family, but behind every headline, the truth lived quietly in Liana's trembling hands as she held Alex's, feeling the warmth of life pulsing beneath his skin. The bullet had only grazed him, but the sight of him bleeding for her still haunted her nights. She would wake with a cry, only to find his arm wrapped around her, strong and reassuring. The morning light that followed their darkest night was golden, almost poetic, painting the skyline with a promise that maybe, just maybe, their love had truly survived every storm. The mall, once a place of humiliation, stood now as a symbol of rebirth. Reporters crowded its marble floors, people murmured blessings, and the same shoppers who once mocked her now looked at Liana with awe, as if she had stepped out of a fairy tale rewritten by fate itself. She stood at the center of that glittering hall, her soft brown skin glowing under chandeliers, her black curls falling in elegant waves, dressed in a white gown that shimmered like light itself. Her 3 daughters, Amara, Mia, and Nia, stood beside her, matching ribbons in their hair, holding each other's hands tightly, as if afraid the moment might vanish. Alex stood beside them, tall and commanding even with his arm bandaged, his tailored suit unable to hide the exhaustion in his eyes. But when he looked at Liana, the world seemed to pause again. A reporter stepped forward, his voice breaking through the applause. "Mr. Alexander Knight, after everything that has happened, what do you feel right now?" Alex's gaze never left his wife. His answer came softly, but it carried through the hall with the weight of truth. "I feel home." The crowd erupted in cheers, flashes of cameras painting their faces in bursts of light. Liana's heart swelled as Alex guided her to the stage set beneath a new banner, velvet red and embroidered in gold letters, Amara Plaza. He turned to the audience, his voice steady. "This mall isn't just a business, it's where I found what truly matters. My family." He turned to Liana and continued, his tone breaking with emotion. "For years I searched for them, never knowing if they were safe, if they remembered me. But love doesn't die. It waits, it fights, it forgives." His words melted through her, And when he lifted her hand to his lips, she felt every unspoken apology in that kiss. Tears spilled down her cheeks as the triplets clapped excitedly, their laughter echoing through the hall like music. Amara tugged her mother's dress and whispered, "Mommy, we're famous now." Liana knelt, smiling through her tears. "No, baby. We're home now." Alex crouched beside them, his gaze softening as he brushed Amara's cheek. "And no one will ever take you away again." For a heartbeat, everything felt perfect. Lights shimmering, people cheering, the world spinning with hope. Yet even as the music began and confetti rained down, Alex's hand brushed against his pocket, feeling the faint edge of the sealed envelope. "From Sabrina, round 2. The words burned in his mind, an omen sealed in white paper. He pushed the thought aside, forcing himself to focus on the joy in front of him, but somewhere deep down, a shadow stirred. As the event ended, Liana and Alex led their daughters through the crowd, greeting well-wishers, smiling for photographs. The girls twirled in their new dresses, unaware of the quiet storm waiting beyond the glass doors. "You did it!" Liana whispered as they stepped into the cool night air. "No," Alex murmured, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "We did it." Their limousine pulled up, headlights gleaming like eyes in the dark, and the family climbed inside. The city lights reflected across the glass, painting their faces in gold and silver streaks. Liana leaned against Alex's chest, finally allowing herself to exhale. "It's over," she said softly. "We can finally live." Alex kissed her forehead, his heartbeat steady against her ear. "Yes," he whispered, but his hand brushed against the envelope again, and unease rippled through him like ice. That night, the house was filled with laughter. The triplets ran through the halls, still wearing their ribbons, dancing in the living room as Liana recorded them on her phone, their giggles echoing off the walls like bells. Alex stood by the fireplace, watching his family with a mix of awe and guilt. He had built empires, bought skyscrapers, survived boardroom wars, but nothing compared to this. The sight of his daughters safe, their tiny hands reaching for him, was worth more than every dollar he'd ever earned. "Daddy, dance with us!" Mia called, and soon he was twirling them one by one, his laughter blending with theirs, his eyes meeting Liana's over the flicker of the flames. She smiled, whispering, "You're finally free, Alex." He wanted to believe it. Hours later, the girls were asleep in their beds, their small breaths rising and falling in rhythm. Liana walked into their room, kissed each forehead, and whispered a prayer of gratitude. When she turned, she found Alex standing in the doorway, holding the envelope. "You still haven't opened it?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, his expression unreadable. "Part of me doesn't want to," he admitted. "Part of me wants to protect this peace, this moment." Liana stepped closer, her fingers brushing his chest. "Then don't," she said softly. "Whatever's inside, it can wait." But the curiosity, the instinct of a man who had built an empire on secrets and strategy, won out. "Just one look," he murmured. He sat by the window, moonlight cutting across his face, and slowly broke the seal. The paper crackled like thunder in the silence. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, taken from afar. His family, standing outside the mall earlier that day, smiles bright, unaware of the dark lens that had captured them. At the bottom, scrawled in red ink, were 5 chilling words. "The real game has just begun." Alex's pulse quickened. The penmanship wasn't Sabrina's. The realization struck like lightning. Someone else was out there, someone even more dangerous, watching, waiting. He looked up, scanning the night through the window. The city stretched endlessly, beautiful and menacing all at once. "Alex?" Liana's voice was sleepy, concerned. He forced a smile, folding the note and sliding it into his desk drawer. "Nothing," he said softly, crossing the room to her. Just business. She frowned, sensing the unease beneath his calm. Promise me it's over, she whispered, her eyes shimmering with love and fear. He touched her cheek, his voice low. I promise I'll protect you. Always. He pulled her into his arms, her head resting against his heart, his eyes never leaving the window behind her. The moonlight revealed a shadow outside, someone watching from across the street, camera glinting briefly before disappearing into the dark. Hours later, when silence had swallowed the night, the wind whispered against the glass, carrying with it a faint echo of laughter, one that didn't belong to anyone inside the house. The camera's red light blinked once in the distance, recording the sleeping family as the city moved on, unaware that a new story had already begun to write itself. Liana shifted in her sleep, her hand still holding Alex's. He turned toward her, brushed a curl from her face and whispered, "No matter what comes next, we'll face it together." Outside, the same figure stepped into a waiting car, the photograph of the Knight family resting on the dashboard. A voice crackled through a radio. "Phase 2 begins tomorrow." The car pulled away, its taillights fading into the horizon as dawn painted the sky in shades of fire and gold. Inside their home, unaware of the eyes still watching, Alex tightened his arm around Liana and their daughters, the promise of love and war echoing in the quiet room. The world believed their story had ended with triumph, but for those who truly knew power, this was never the end. It was only the beginning. As the first light of morning touched their window, Alex's phone buzzed with a new message, an image of the same mall sign, Amara Plaza, smeared with red paint spelling just 3 words, "Welcome back, Knight."